Hello, bonjour, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katie Gray, and I'm the project manager at the World Trade Centre Winnipeg. I would like to begin today by respectfully acknowledging that this webinar is coming to you from Treaty 1 territory, traditional territory of the First Nations, and the homeland of the Métis. So thank you all for joining our Sales and Marketing Action Plan with Pricing Strategies webinar, which will be presented by Allison Pell. So I'll just share a bit of housekeeping information. Please send all your webinar questions directly to the chat box at the top of your screen, and Allison will try to answer as many as she can in a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. For any logistical questions, you can also send them to the chat box or directly to me by clicking on my name at Katie Gray. Just a reminder that you will all receive a PDF copy of this presentation by end of day, and the recording of the webinar will be posted to our YouTube channel. So now it is time to start our webinar. So I'd like to introduce you to Allison Pell. For the last 16 years, Allison has worked with entrepreneurs of all sizes in almost every industry with one thing in common: a desire to grow and succeed in business. She assists entrepreneurs with securing appropriately structured BDC term loans designed to preserve working capital. Common projects include injection of working capital, acquisition of real estate, investment in equipment, upgrades to technology, and shareholder buyouts. Through BDC Advisory Services, Allison has also helped entrepreneurs with their growth or exit strategies, improvements in their productivity and processes, and leveraging the right sales and marketing strategies. So we are in great hands today. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you. Am I good to go? Okay, thank you, Katie, and thanks to the World Trade Centre Winnipeg for having me today. My name is Allison Pell, and I've been, as you mentioned, I've been working directly with entrepreneurs here at BDC in Winnipeg for the last 16 years. And I'm also currently covering for one of our business center managers who's on an assignment, so I'm actually leading a team of lenders right now as well. So let's get started. I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you about the foundational elements of a marketing plan that will lead to increased returns from your sales and marketing efforts, as well as five common pricing strategies, including the 7 steps to setting the right price for your products or services when you're using the cost plus pricing strategy. So we'll get into a little more detail on that one. We have about an hour together, so I won't be able to get into, super fine details, but we'll be able to share the information with you and my contact information if you have any follow-up questions. So let's get started. So first, take a look at this slide and think about if any of this sounds like you. So many entrepreneurs invest in, new promotional tactics and end up disappointed by the results, or they've done the same thing for years and they're wondering if their business is growing as well as it could be. So you might find that you're asking yourself some of these types of questions. So, how much should we spend on marketing? Is our brand competitive? How can we track better data? Are we targeting the right customer? How can we align our sales and marketing teams to work together more effectively? Are customers finding us online? Is our website converting them into customers when they do find us? Do we know enough about our customers to market to them effectively? Why isn't our social media strategy paying off, or should we expand to other markets? So if any of this sounds familiar, then you're not alone. Many businesses have unanswered questions that make it difficult to plan for growth. So collecting this type of data can help your business answer these types of questions and help you to build a better strategy. As I mentioned, many entrepreneurs lack a systematic, structured approach to their sales and marketing, and using a fragmented approach will provide fragmented results, and this is why they're not seeing the results that they should. Your activities have to work together to drive your pipeline and your customer acquisition. In the coming slides, I'm going to go through some key elements to consider when putting your plan together, and when you reflect on these elements for your business, you have to think about how they're all interrelated. So I just want to pause here. This is a link to a template. So at bdc.ca, you'll find a marketing plan template. And this is one example of an easy to use DIY tool that you could use to help put your plan together. So it's a bit of a long link there. So if you just went to bdc.ca and searched for marketing plan template, you'd be able to find it relatively easily. So putting the plan together should be something that you can do yourself, or it could be something that you hire someone to do for you. But in either case, it would be a worthwhile exercise to fill in a template like this. Again, either to follow for yourself, or if you were going to hire someone, at least you could give them the plan and jot down on paper some of your ideas, and that would help you execute on your plans a little better. So if you've taken any marketing courses, then this slide might be familiar to you because this is the 4 Ps. So a good sales and marketing plan is having a well thought out marketing mix that includes these 4 Ps. So they are product, place, promotion, and price. So over this session, we're going to touch on all these elements, but later on, we're going to, specifically look at the pricing strategies a little bit more. And so before we get into the 4 Ps, I want to highlight the importance of your brand. So a well-defined brand will guide your decisions as it relates to the 4 Ps. So if you want your brand to be about, high quality, high value, your pricing strategy needs to reflect that. So for example, you don't go to Nordstrom's and expect to pay like bargain basement prices. Conversely, if your brand is known for being great value, like at an all-you-can-eat, buffet at a reasonable price, then your pricing needs to reflect that also. All of the aspects of your marketing mix are interrelated. And it's a little bit out of scope today, but we also have a great article on our website about branding and how to build your company's brand. So and it's actually the 5 steps of building your brand. So I'll just kind of mention them here, but I would encourage you to look on our website for that. So conduct effective market research, focus on a unique value proposition, choose a brand name that delivers your message clearly, create an emotional connection, and deliver consistent communication. So those are kind of the 5 steps to building your brand. So the first P is product. So pretty self-explanatory. Product is defined as a product or service made by a company to meet a customer need. So the better it meets that need, then the more you can charge for it. So you might also want to consider how well your product is understood by the people you're trying to sell it to. So if you're marketing a staple item like food or pens, it's safe to say, your marketing doesn't need to include an educational piece. People know what those things are. And similarly, they could be universally used by a lot of people. So, your marketing can be very broad and your target audience is very broad. Compare that to a product which is, maybe a new concept or only needed by a very specific type of audience. So like, for example, when, video baby monitors would have been released. So that would have been a new product that would have required some education, right? You need this product because here's what this product does. It's new to the market. And then it's also marketed to a very kind of niche market, right? New parents primarily. So the next P is pricing. So we're going to get into that a little bit more later, but pricing is based on how much it costs to make, market, distribute, and sell your product. And on top of that, the profit margin that you want to charge and that you want to be earning. So when a product is strongly differentiated, a company can price it higher than the competitor's product without losing market share. So I'm not going to go into too much detail now because we've got a whole section later on. The next P is place. So that refers to all the ways that customers search for, choose, buy, and use a company's product or services. So companies need to consider these places, which may be physical or online, when developing their marketing plan. So throughout the recent pandemic, we've seen, more companies embrace an e-commerce strategy to enable clients to access their products and services. So we saw a wide variety of products shift to online. So, traditional retail, I mean, that was an easy transition, but then we also saw the explosion of the skip the dishes type of products, right, where food delivery being done through online became huge. And even personal services, like for example a beauty salon, I would say that I definitely noticed more online promotion of booking an appointment. So that ensures that there's not too many people waiting in a waiting room, and it ensures your place and your appointment. So a lot of different products and services have shifted online. And then tying it back to your brand, you want to make sure that the places that you sell your product are also on brand. So, you're not going to find like a luxury brand like a Louis Vuitton at Walmart, for example. The final P is promotion. So this is what many people think of when they hear the word marketing. So it refers to the overall campaign of communications used to sell a product. So this often includes advertising, sales promotion, in-person sales, public relations, social media marketing, email marketing, search engine optimization, video marketing, and more. So a company with more than one market segment might have a different mix for each segment with a separate budget assigned to each one. And once again, you're going to tie your promotion back to your brand. So the places in which you choose to sell your product are a reflection of your overall brand. So you want to make sure that it's all in line. So we've talked about the 4 Ps of marketing. So the final 2 elements that we're going to talk about are your customer, of course, arguably, the most important, as well as your competition. So it's very important to know your customer and understand their purchase journey. The more you know about them and understand what is important to them, the better you'll be able to target them with your strategy. So customer segmentation is a good way to look at this. Most businesses have, 2 or 3 different segments that have different needs and a willingness to pay. And then, you also want to consider the cost of acquisition of a customer and the lifetime value of a customer. So the acquisition cost can be related to the advertising and promotion dollars that you spend on them in the first place, the cost of the salespeople, presentations, demos, whatever it is that's needed to acquire that customer and get them to make a purchase or sign a PO. So that's the acquisition cost to acquire that customer. And then the lifetime value of the customer is the value over time that they stay your customer. So maybe they renew a subscription with you every year, and they typically do that for 3 years. Or maybe they buy a new car from you every 3 years and spend X dollars a month on maintenance and service with you, or they buy 5 cars over time. So what you want to determine is what is the lifetime value of that customer less what was the acquisition cost to acquire them. And ideally, you want that to be a positive number, right? You want to make sure that the benefit that you're getting from that customer is more than it cost you to acquire them. And not all customers are created equal. So you need a way to understand which are most profitable. And this requires you to segment the customer based into different types. You need to know where to focus and invest resources, and that might help you recognize the need for different marketing messages or product features. And I also want to point out that just because someone wants to buy for you, I mean, obviously the main goal is to get a customer, but you can fire your customer too, right? So you have to think about, again, am I getting more from this customer than they're costing me? And so sometimes that means, kind of evaluating your customer base and making sure that you're focusing on the most profitable aspects of your customer base. So finally, you want to consider your competition. So you want to know, what products and services do your competitors offer, how they offer it, and what they charge for it, as well as what additional services are included in their price. They're all critical to producing your own strategy. So market conditions change all the time, COVID being a good example. What worked before changed, and suddenly now everyone's shopping online or doing curbside pickup. So you need to stay aware of what's happening and make sure that you're adapting and following trends and staying on top of what your competitors are doing. So a question that I always ask entrepreneurs, and it's amazing how many don't always have the answer. What is your value proposition? So why would a customer choose to buy from you over a competitor? And again, it's amazing that how many don't have a good answer to that. That's really the key to your strategy. You need to understand what differentiates you from your competition and why someone would choose you over a competitor. So we talked about the important marketing mix elements to include in a detailed sales and marketing plan. So we have product, pricing, place, and promotion. And we also discussed how the analysis of your customer plays a critical role in the formulation of your plan, and as well as an analysis of your competition. So here's some other factors to consider when putting together your own plan. So think about the opportunities and threats that emerge from performing a SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis being, of course, strengths and weaknesses, which are internally focused, and then opportunities and threats, which are externally focused. You want to understand those opportunities and threats when you're putting your plan together. What are your financial and non-financial objectives, both overall and by market segment or geographic region? You have to kind of know going into it what you're looking to achieve from a financial and non-financial perspective. And again, going back to what are your competitive advantages and what's your value proposition, you really have to understand that. Do you have specific tactics for the 4 Ps, product, pricing, place, and promotion? And what is the timing for these tactics, right? So at what point are you going to do what comes first, and how are they kind of interrelated? And again, relating them back to brand. And then what is the timing? Sorry, I said that. Who is responsible for each part of the plan, along with monitoring and the reporting requirements? So, it's great to have a plan, but you need to understand who is going to execute on all parts of the plan and making sure that they're all covered. And, if it's not something, like if you have a small team and it's not something that you can do on your own, then maybe you either need to scale it back or think about hiring either, a staff person or even just hiring someone to execute or assist you with those parts of your plan. And of course, near and dear to my heart as a lender, what is your budget and how are you going to control costs, right? So, if you had an unlimited marketing budget, certainly you can bring customers in, but, unfortunately we don't. So you want to make sure that what you're getting more in than what you're putting out. So a well-constructed sales and marketing plan increases your chances of success by creating clear goals, actions, and accountabilities. And the key is to start. It doesn't have to be perfect, but in an increasingly competitive environment, I mean, you've got to start somewhere. So again, I always say to entrepreneurs when they're preparing any type of plan, whether it's a business plan at startup or an expansion plan, a strategic plan, a marketing plan, the plan doesn't need to be 50 pages. It doesn't need to be, you know, this thick. It should be as complex as your business is, and it has to be actionable for you. So if you don't understand it, or if it's too complex, or, you know, if it gets too detailed, then it's not helpful. Like it should be something that, you know, that you have a good understanding of, that you can execute, and quite frankly, it's going to change over time as well. So next, we're going to dive into some pricing strategies. So as we talked about, pricing is one of the 4 P's of the marketing mix, and it's an important element to your sales and marketing plan. So we'll dive into these 5 common pricing strategies with the objective of helping you to select and define your pricing strategy. Some important notes on pricing overall. You need to align your team and also revisit regularly based on an ever-changing environment. Sorry, I said that. And then on the coming slides, we're going to go over the 5 common pricing techniques, the most common being cost plus. So we're going to spend, you know, the most time on that. So we could probably spend, you know, an entire hour just going through cost plus pricing, and in particular, probably this slide alone. But the takeaway here is that, you know, this is a systematic approach to calculating your costs and adding a markup. This is probably the strategy that takes the most thought or analysis, and there are 7 actionable steps to follow that you can see here. So as a banker, what I like about this strategy is that it keeps profitability top of mind. So first, you want to calculate your direct costs. So direct costs include the cost of the raw materials, including duty, freight, or shipping charges, plus direct labor costs that are incurred to produce a product or provide a service. So you have to understand, you know, what does it cost to produce, you know, the widget. Next, you want to calculate your cost of goods sold or cost of sales, and that represents the cost of producing the product or providing a service so that it's ready for sale. So if you're a retailer or manufacturer, your cost of goods sold includes your direct costs plus other costs such as, you know, general supplies, freight, factory overhead that are incurred to produce and deliver the product to your end customer. So if you're a transportation or wholesaler, your cost of sales would include your direct costs plus other costs such as labor and equipment if there's a warehouse or a garage, for instance. So a simple way to calculate cost of goods sold is to add up your raw materials, product costs, wages, benefits, amortization expenses, and factory overhead. So on a financial statement, that's often, you know, your sales less your cost of goods sold would equal your gross margin. And beneath that is where you would have, you know, your fixed costs like keeping the lights on, you know, wages, and, you know, kind of the bare bones fixed costs that you'd have to cover whether you sell a single widget or not. And the third one, I think this is really, really important, especially for a new business starting out, would be to calculate your break-even point. So you need to know what is a minimum level of sales for you to cover those direct costs with producing your product or service, as well as all your fixed costs. So the way that you calculate that is you divide your fixed costs divided by sales per unit less the variable cost per unit. And sometimes that's called your contribution margin. And again, you'll get this presentation later, or it's something that you can look up, but you really want to understand what is my break-even point, and that's going to help you guide your pricing, right? So you know that, okay, I need to sell 10,000 units just to cover my direct costs as well as my fixed costs, and at the end of the year, I won't make a profit, but I will have at least, you know, paid all my expenses, and that's what's going to guide you to create your markup, right? So the markup is expressed as a percentage of cost of goods sold, but you want to make sure that you charge a high enough markup to, again, cover those fixed costs, as well as it's going to represent your profit margin. So that goes back to your plan and the goals that you're going to create for yourself. What is my targeted profit margin? You know, how much money do I want to make at the end of the year, right? And so obviously the pricing is a key element of that. And then, you know, the last 3 are kind of, it's great if you do the math and you determine, okay, I'm going to charge a 50% markup, but the reality is, well, what is your competition doing and what will the market bear? So 0.5 here, knowing what the market will bear. So if you operate in like a low margin environment, like a grocery store, and all of your competitors, operate with low profit margins, and you try to come in and charge more, like who's going to come to your store, right? And if you're going to charge more, then you better be providing some type of, better service for them to do that. Like, you have to kind of understand, the market and the sort of the standard pricing or margins for your industry. And again, this is something you can tie back to your plan, and you can tie it back to brand. So what is my brand? So like, think of like a Whole Foods or something in the US. They would have higher margin products, but that would go back to the brand, their position in the market. And so next would be scanning the competition. So your competitors' prices can have a direct impact, of course, on what you're able to charge. Goes back to the grocery example. So you have to scan the competition. So you want to know, what are they offering? What are their prices? And that'll give you kind of a sense of the going rate and give you an idea of how you can differentiate. So a good example of that, I'll use the example of like a snowplow company. So if you have a snowplow company and you've been in business for a number of years, well, chances are you've paid for your equipment long ago. So you can probably charge a little bit lower rate because you don't have, the lending costs or whatever the interest costs with buying new equipment. So if you're going to be competing in that type of environment where your competitors have paid off their equipment long ago, if you're a new entry, then you better be differentiating yourself in some other way, like with, superior service, or maybe, going back to like place. So maybe, you can book me online and my competitors, haven't evolved to that point. Like, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself based on your competition. And then finally, you want to revisit your prices, regularly. So the environment that we're in is constantly changing, and that can evaluate or can affect your goals and margins. So you have to revisit often. So if you're going to raise prices, it's a good practice, to personally explain that to your customers and the reasons why, because they're not going to be thinking about their costs. They're going to be thinking about, why does that cost more for me? They don't really care about you or your, profitability goals. So maybe, for example, you haven't had a price increase in a few years, you could mention that. Or maybe the rest of the competition has raised their prices. And if they have, then, they've kind of proven already that the market can bear that. So you could do the same, thing. And I would say, probably at this point in time, customers are going to be pretty understanding of price increases, because if we look at, supply chain delays, lack of availability of product, input costs are increasing, and I think the market has a pretty good understanding of that. So they're probably going to be more understanding of, the fact that you need to increase your prices as well. So that's cost plus pricing, again, near and dear to my heart as a lender, because it really is focused in profitability. So next, competitive pricing. So the next four actually are a little less complex, and I think you would need to monitor them a little more regularly because they're not as much tied to your actual costs, but still, something to consider. So competitive pricing is really just setting a price based on what the competition charges. So it's hard to set yourself apart if you're matching competitors' prices, right? It tends to turn you into commodity. So often a phrase that we'll hear is, it's a race to a bottom. So think of like gas wars, right? We've heard of gas wars where, they lower their price and then across the street they do. It's really the same product. Service is very, very similar. I mean, you're driving up, you're filling your tank, and you drive away. So it's something that you want to be really cautious of, right? Because again, race to the bottom. You can't be losing money on every transaction, right? Maybe to gain a few customers you could, but that's something that you could really only do for a very short period of time. So you might want to use, competitive pricing to lure a customer to your business with the goal of maybe selling them on a higher margin item, right? So I'm winning the gas war, but my markup on like drinks and food is a little bit higher, so I'm making up the funds, somewhere else. So again, it comes back to the analysis of your costs and profits. So value-based pricing. So this is kind of interesting too. So I think we kind of understand, cost or competitive pricing, but value-based pricing is a little bit different. It's a little bit more difficult to define. It would typically be used for like professional services, like a knowledge-based solutions or something in, like the B2B space. So an example could be, hiring a business consultant, for example. So if you knew that, the business consultant was going to come in and advise you on a number of topics, and based on what you learned from that, you were going to realize some efficiencies and save on costs. Maybe you're going to save, $10,000 to $15,000 every year for the next 5 to 10 years, right? You can quantify that And so you might say, okay, well, what is that worth to me? There's a real value in that. I can calculate, the present value of those savings. And as long as I'm paying, less than X, then this, the value is there for me. The problem is that it's often, those types of services, it's very hard to define, what the savings might be. It's kind of like the perceived value. So if you're going to be using value-based pricing, like how comfortable are you feel, do you feel talking to your customer about your price versus the value that you generate? Are you able to create like a compelling case and a compelling reason for that, business to pay you that amount of money? Can you clearly explain the benefits? So, this is a little bit tougher, but again, something that we would see more in like a professional services type of space. And again, value-based pricing, you'd probably use a bit of, competitive analysis too. So if you're an accountant, for example, like you would look at, well, what do other accountants charge for this service? Like maybe I can charge a little bit less, my overhead's less, but again, it goes back to that value. So the next one is price skimming. So price skimming means, setting the highest initial price that a customer will pay and then lowering it as the market evolves. So as the demand for the first customer is satisfied and competition enters the market, you lower the price to attract a more price sensitive segment of the market. So this would be a really good strategy for a new or, revolutionary product. So typically it would be some form of technology. The higher price suggests quality and exclusivity and is often paid by an early adopter. So if you think back to like the $1,000 DVD players from the 90s, right? Because the early adopters, they really wanted it. It was a sign of, I'm really with the times and, exclusivity. And now you can get one on Amazon for like $30, right? So over time, prices of those types of products, you will see them decrease over time. And again, you can't charge those high prices forever, right? So that's just to get a certain segment of the market, and then you're going to lower your price over time. And then the opposite of that, and our final strategy would be penetration pricing. So this is the opposite of price skimming. It's a strategy where you set a low price to enter a competitive market and raise it later or over time. But it's important to understand that penetration pricing, doesn't mean selling at a loss. It can still be profitable, but it might be maybe not in the short term, but maybe more so in the long term. So you would use this strategy to gain market share quickly and then raise the prices as your customers come to depend on your product or service. So a great example of this would be Netflix, right? So Netflix came in and it was like whatever, $7 a month or whatever it is. And the content that they produced, like it was very well known that, they were not profitable for many, many years, but they needed to get a critical mass of customers in order to kind of make up for that loss. And now, when you see a Netflix price increase, it's kind of like you sort of shrug your shoulders, right? They'll come to a point where the market maybe won't bear anymore, but they certainly have been operating at a loss. But you come to depend on your Netflix, and so a few dollars here and there, and you're not racing out to cancel your subscription. So why BDC? So what I've presented is really just kind of an overview of some of the expertise that we have at BDC. We work directly with clients providing financing, but also advisory services, including, what I mentioned today, sales and marketing strategies. So I'm going to give you a little more of an overview of our reach and the services offered in case you'd like some more specific support for your business from BDC. So to give you an idea of our reach, we have more than, 2,500 employees across 123 business centers across the country. And we are Canada's development bank. So we need to be where the entrepreneurs are and provide them with the financing and advisory that they need when they need it. And so thanks to our national presence, we're able to reach entrepreneurs in each region of Canada. We work with 72,000 and counting entrepreneurs across the country. And we have 41.2 billion in capital committed to small and medium-sized businesses. So, and our client satisfaction rate is 94%. So that's speaks for itself. So again, this is just an overview of the services that we provide. We do flexible financing. So like it was mentioned in my bio, we do specific term-based loans. So, starting a business, a working capital injection, purchasing a business, equipment, real estate, that type of thing. We do advisory services. So that's a fee-for-service type of product. So, we work with clients directly. So if you determine that, you want to put together a sales and marketing plan, you have some ideas, but you're not sure that you have the capabilities, or you want, someone to sort of check it for you, or improve the plan. That's something that we do directly with entrepreneurs as well. And then we also have a capital group that does kind of venture capital, and more patient capital. So we have a very experienced team of sales and marketing consultants, like I mentioned, who can help you with the right solutions for your business. We can also provide, financing for those services. So I encourage you to visit our website. I mentioned it earlier. Our sales and marketing template is on there. There's articles about branding. A lot about what we've talked about today is on our website. I really do find that our website is such a great resource. Like this sort of gives you a snippet of some of the questions you might be asking, and there's a lot of articles and resources on there that you can access. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions. So I guess we were pretty quick to go through the material there. So if you have any questions.
Hi, Allison.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm just getting a little feedback here, but great presentation. I really appreciated all the tips and tricks. So thank you so much. Sorry, my camera's just so everyone knows, I'm having a little bit of tech issues over here today. So sorry about that. I'll just give me a second. So I did see a question come in the chat. Does BDC have a preference on which pricing strategy is better?
I mean, again, from a banker's perspective, I would probably say that, whichever strategy you're using, just make sure you're checking it regularly. I think a cost, like I think doing the cost analysis is really important. So even if you decide to use, like a price skimming or that type of strategy, you still want to make sure you have a good understanding of your costs, right? And even if you do look at a competitor and the competitor charges X, you have to understand, where that competitor is coming from. And, and that's an advantage, right? If a business has been around for a number of years, they've paid off a lot of their assets, or, they've established themselves in some way. So many times, you can't make the same profit that they can if you're new to the market, because you have costs that they don't have. So you've got to be careful of using a lot of those strategies. So I would say, any of them can work. You just want to make sure that you have a really good understanding of your costs going into it, and check it regularly.
That's a really great point. Sorry, I'm going to have to keep my camera off.
No
it's
problem.
a little glitchy right now.
No problem.
Yeah, and so I guess we're just waiting for some other questions to come in. So I'm wondering also, if for branding, what type of support does BDC offer for kind of branding information? I know it's a hot topic in developing
Yes.
brand. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think we don't think about brand enough, and we don't give it the importance that it sort of deserves. Like I had a client a number of years ago, and he was looking to introduce a pretty revolutionary product to the market, and was talking a lot about marketing strategies, and how he was going to market this new product. And he actually went through, we offered like a branding solution. So he worked with some of our advisors on branding to help him kind of come up with, who's my customer, what's their persona, right? So a persona is sort of like, what are the key attributes of my customer? Like, what type of business do they have? How old are they? What are their buying habits? And he kind of came up with a couple of really key personas of who he was targeting, and that helped him to define his brand. So he was able to go through it and kind of say, okay, my brand is this. I target this type of client. I'm looking for someone who's, looking for high quality, et cetera, et cetera. And then what we did was came up with a brand kind of playbook for him. And he said that was just absolutely key for him, because then when he was evaluating different opportunities, different, people who wanted to partner, or evaluating a distributor who might carry his product, he was able to go back to that sort of brand brief and say, okay, is this on brand? And it just really helped him in guiding his decisions going forward and how he was going to grow the business.
really, really great point. So I do have another question. How do I scan what the market can bear for pricing?
I mean, you've got to do like your market research, I guess, right? So market research and kind of determining what are other people charging. And then, it could also just be trial and error, which I know can be a little bit risky because it's real dollars that are at risk. But I mean, if you're not getting the data that you need from doing market research and determining, what are competitors offering, then you might just have to sort of try it, right? And see what they'll bear, right? And just kind of trial and error.
Great point. Thank you. And just in case anyone is looking for some secondary market research, just so you know, the World Trade Center does offer secondary market research. After this, I'll just pop a link into the chat to our secondary market research request form. So it can definitely help you generate some of that information. So I have another question from Dennis. In your experience, what would you say the most successful pricing strategy for a tech startup? So a company that builds an app that provides a social service of some sort, for example.
Tech, I have to admit, tech is like its own animal. I mean, even the way we evaluate financing for tech is just completely different than anything else, right? I mean, the models and the forecasting for tech are so unique. So that would be a tough one, right? Again, I would probably go back to market research and seeing, what other similar, and if there aren't similar, I mean, what other apps are charging, but I think it would go back to market research. And it and depending on the app and what it does, it could be value based too, right? Like apps are so broad in their capabilities and what they're doing, right? So maybe going back to, okay, what will this save the customer, right? If going back to that value-based pricing, like, is it going to save them time? Is it going to save them money? Like, what is it that your app is doing and what value is it to the customer? And maybe starting there, because again, tech is so unique in terms of covering costs. It's not like manufacturing a widget, right? Like you're basically wanting to be compensated, for your time and your idea and your research and your knowledge, right? And so many times for that, you want to like hit the market and make a return. And then obviously it's a subscription model, so you're going to make that money back over time. But I would say probably look at your competitors, do a competitive analysis, and also look at the value. Like think about it from the customer's perspective and what value does your app bring in terms of savings or knowledge, etc.
Great point. And thank you for your question, Dennis. I also was wondering, do you think that it is for small businesses, that it is a risky strategy, the market penetration pricing strategy, such as Netflix did, kind of start low and go high, because they maybe have the capabilities with, external funding to run in a deficit, but
Absolutely. That's even when I was talking about it, that's what I was, thinking to myself and thinking about this presentation. I think if you're going to do a strategy like that, you probably have some real business savvy and also some deep pockets, right? Because for how long have they had to bear losses, right? So that would be, I would say, if you're newer and starting up, hopefully you've got some cash behind you, or it's a strategy that you're not going to use for long because it could be very costly. And when does that, because then you go back to the break even point, right? Like when does that break even point occur, and how much risk can I take on until I get to that break even point, right? So definitely that would be a strategy I'd be very cautious of, and you want to make sure you have some real business savvy as well as deep pockets.
yeah, for sure. And Dennis just said same with Uber. So not sure if you have any comments on that.
In terms of pricing for Uber, oh my gosh, that like, yeah, that's that's a tough one, right? Uber and like Skip the Dishes, right? Because those types of businesses where we're like, okay, this is this is convenient for people, but what impact and what ripple effect do these types, or Airbnb, what ripple effect do these types of businesses have in the market, right? Like they really come in and make a big impact. And so I probably should study Uber's financial statements to understand, but I honestly, like, I think that the success of like an Uber or Skip kind of comes on the backs of like the drivers, right? Like, and like Skip, for example, they don't employ the drivers, right? Like the drivers are kind of on contract, right? So yeah, I don't know. Same with Uber. It's that's a tough one.
Definitely, these giant tech firms have unique financing. So
unique costing. So maybe, Dennis, I will study their financial statements, and I'll get back to you. I'll have to look at the historicals, see where they've come from. Maybe hopefully they're public and I could do that.
And so I actually had one more question. When BDC is looking at loan applications or requests, or so business plans, pretty much, do they have a particular break-even point that they often look for, or a projected break-even point?
It has to be reasonable, right? So if we're looking for a break-even point, chances are we're looking at financing for, a new or, growing business that's maybe either they're starting from scratch or they're at point A and they're trying to get to point B. So that, the nice thing about BDC is that we are a little bit more future looking, and, we will value forecasts. So if your break-even point could be 3 months away, or it could be, a year away or whatever, it's about having the right cash in place to sustain those losses. And quite frankly, if you come to me with the knowledge that you already know your break-even point, and you say to me, hey, Allison, my break-even point occurs 6 months from today, therefore my cash shortfall is, $100,000, but at this point I'm going to be making this. And if you've done your homework, like, I'm going to be impressed, right? So the break-even point doesn't have to be tomorrow, but it's important for you to know when it is, know how you're going to get there, and what funds you might require to get there. And that's going to, that says a lot, because it says that you really understand your costs, you really understand your growth, and you really understand your cash flow. So that can be really powerful.
Great point. So do your research with your business plan for sure. So I guess I'll just do a quick moment that WTC is offering a business planning program, which starts April 19th for our spring cohort. I know Dennis has participated in our winter cohort. So if you are interested in developing that financial plan, we do offer some pretty in-depth resources during that program. But it seems like that's all the questions we have for today. I'm going to try my camera here, see if it participates one last time. It is not. So oh, there we go.
Dennis has given you an endorsement. He highly recommends your program.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you for joining today. So thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Allison. It was really great and a lot of great information. And thank you very much for all of our participants today and for your questions. So it was a great webinar.
Thank you.
Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.